for watching Inspirational Whispers. In a world where inspiration and purpose is so needed, we find it to help you change your life. Today, I have a magnificent guest, Ginger Z, the head chief meteorologist of ABC News, and you've also written some books. And oh my gosh, you've been all over the world, natural disasters, but then you took time and you wrote these books about yourself and mental health. And, just really quickly, Ginger, can you tell us, what made this big decision? What happened?
To write books. I think I was pregnant with my son and I never considered myself a writer, but when I was looking for books for babies about weather, I found what I thought was a void in the market. And I thought, you know what, I could handle writing a book about weather at this point in my career and for a baby. And I went to a publisher and I started talking about a character that I had dreamed up and would want to tell a story about. And they were like, that's more of a middle grade. And so I started talking about what I would base that chapter book on. And even though I didn't think of myself as a writer, I was like, oh, I don't write. She said, well, just go try. And as I was considering what parts of my life I would base that character on, I started telling stories just audibly to this editor. And then I started telling stories about my life. And she was like, that's a book. And so it really came of wanting to do a book for babies about sunshine and rainbows. And suddenly I was telling, a memoir about suicide and depression. So it was quite the turn, but it was meant to happen. And I think I'm so grateful that I have had this, selfishly for healing, but also I've been able to take my talent of communicating science of the atmosphere and apply it to communicating science of psychology.
Beautiful. So I'm curious. The idea of this show is to really help people understand how they can inspire their lives and take action in their lives. And, so how was your life before, the suicides, before the incident that happened that was the catalyst for all that? What was life growing up for you?
Yeah, I think I grew up pretty normal. I was born in Southern California, but that was just because my mom was in grad school there. Both my parents had met in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So we moved back there pretty soon after. And I would say relatively normal. My parents got divorced, which was pretty common in the 80s. And, and then, in that divorce, I know that I, just like many children, I found control in, other ways. And so for me, that was an eating disorder. And that's really where my mental health journey started. And looking back now, it's fascinating now that I have children, because so much of what we do when we get into our psychology is immediately we go to childhood and we go to what did our parents do to us? And now that I have children, I'm realizing yes, there are environmental aspects and there are things that we are responsible for as parents to help them with forming their identity and doing all these things. But at their base, they are who they are. And it's allowed me to forgive my parents a bit and then to take on some responsibility of just making the best version of the person that I was born to be. And I think that has really helped in looking back. So that didn't answer who I was, but I think that's where my life kind of in my mental health journey began as early as, 8, 9 years old.
Wow. Yeah. And then, that is really early, to have that realization that I too understand. It was a very common thing, especially in the 80s, to fit the mold of society and try to control what you can control. And that's something we do have control of.
And I always find it curious when people blame social media. And yes, of course, social media amplifies our want to be perfect and our want to do these things. That's always been there, though. I think I was running an Instagram feed 20 years before Instagram was around, trying to look perfect, trying to put on the face and the look and the body and the thing. Someone wrote me today that had enjoyed my book and really felt a connection. And she said it so well. She said, I have been shrinking in body, in mind, in the way that I speak, to fit others or what I thought others wanted of me for so long, it feels really awkward as I grow through, because we did this kind of condensing for so long, and that was meant to connect to me, because the awkward part is true, right? You're like suddenly reborn and growing and taking up space, and that's sometimes I feel like I am my 5-year-old learning emotional regulation at the same time that he
All
is.
over again. Yeah. Oh, so this amazing journey that seemed very normal, and in a sense, even the mental health issues that started at age 8, 9, very normal.
Mhm.
And then you had this catalyst that happened. Do you want to go into that? Do you want to unpack that a little bit?
So I think if I really look at what the catalyst is, and I should say part of me being a child was also finding a passion and being pretty obsessed with it, and that was the weather. So that part has stuck as well, and has led me quite well, and has really been the healing factor in all of it. Because as I went around chasing natural disasters for the last 20 years, I was able to find great parallels and great healing in seeing how those disasters played out and how a healthy disaster or trauma is dealt with. And so, I can make tons of analogies to do that. But if I go back to, I would say the first time I really knew that something was going quite wrong, I was diagnosed with narcolepsy in my early college year, or not even early. I think I was 20 or something. So I had a year or so left. And they had put me on a medication, which was fantastic. It was like I was awake for the first time in my life. I was sleeping for the first time in my life. I had never done either of those things in full because of narcolepsy and didn't realize it. But I was also feeling, and I had been very good at compartmentalizing and kind of controlling my thoughts, or thinking that I was, and a lot of disassociation that I was pretty masterful at already into my early 20s. That medication kind of broke that door open and did it in a very shocking and strong way. And that was the first time that I felt what I used to call kind of like gray days go black, where I woke up and did not want to live. And that was really the first time that I can understand and sympathize with what it feels like to have suicidal ideation, or to be able to do that. And much like, as a storm chaser, I never think that a meteorologist can be as good of a meteorologist without being a storm chaser, because they've been in the storm, they smell it, they touch it, they feel it. I think that now that as I'm talking about mental health and where we go next in society, I think because I've been there, and not that my story is like the exact same as everyone else's, but because I've smelled it and touched it and felt it, I think that I can speak to this. And so that was really the pivotal point where I should have gotten a lot of help, but didn't.
Yeah, well, and we all have that. I mean,
Mhm.
I not all of us, but many of us, I suffered from anxiety, and there was a point there, my heart was beating, and I felt like I was having a heart attack. My hands would go numb on the steering wheel,
Yeah.
and it was the point that I'm like, maybe I should go to a doctor. Nah,
Yeah.
I can solve this.
Right. Right. I think about that a lot. I think about how, and systemically, how, after I get out of the hospital that time after my suicide attempt, and there is quite a broken system in all of healthcare, but in mental health that has gotten better since then. But it's not perfect. It's far, far, far from perfect, in that, the person who's ill in that place, they're not going to be the one who's taking themselves to the type of therapy they need. They're not going to be the one. In my darkest moments, I wasn't leafing through my insurance pamphlet to see which doctor or therapist I could go to. I didn't even know that there were different types of therapists that could do different types of therapy. So at the very beginning there, I always think that as a society, instead of just talking about destigmatizing, I think we need to educate on how to help people. We are all very aware if we see an accident, someone's leg is shattered, we help them. We take them to the hospital. If somebody comes to you and they say, I am having thoughts of hurting myself or others, we freeze, we paralyze, and it's not necessarily even, it's hard because in that moment, your hands were frozen, and you probably, well, I don't know if you told anyone, but you also felt like you couldn't say it. So we have to get past that part. And then we have to know what to do when you do tell me that your hands went frozen, right?
Yeah.
And where I do take you and how I do help you, because I would do that if your leg was shattered. We have to think of it like that.
Yeah, no, it's so well put, and we don't. And like you said, I mean, I'm even a psychology major, and there's a big point missing, that you have like a plethora of different avenues
Mm.
to have support. So in that darkest moment, could you describe that darkest moment? Like
Sure.
when was the bottom?
I certainly had a few times to be able to reference, and the best I can say is I had those gray moments. I had depressed days. I had days where I'd stayed in bed, and all of those things should have been, to me, the the signs that something was going on. I just kept thinking, I don't know what to do about it. It has to not be like this. And why do I feel like this? That we play that compare game. It's like, well, my life is not that bad. What am I doing? And that makes it worse. And so I
Yeah.
wasn't able to find that. And I also wasn't addressing the truest traumas. I mean, prior to that first suicide attempt, I had a rape. I had not at all dealt with that. I had run as fast as I could and pretended that that did not happen in my life. And then really until I saw all these other men and women shedding their shame in a movement called Me Too, was I able to really stand and say, yeah, that happened to me. And on my way, out of work this morning before I came here, I am reading hundreds of messages that I am struggling to get through that people are sharing the exact same story. And some of them are saying, and I've never dealt with it, and your book, told me I need to. And that just opens me and makes me feel like we are in the right place, that we're connecting and doing just this for the right reason. So going back to like what the darkness feels like and what I would say, I would just say that it was like blinds that had closed. There was just complete blackness, and I had no will to live. I didn't have even a sliver of sunshine or hope. And I often speak to groups, and sometimes, one of them was in Canada with hundreds of parents that had lost their children to suicide. And that is a difficult room to be in, because the reality and the numbers really, really sit there right in front of your face. And many of them were still in the place. And it was sometimes when it's freshest, they were still asking, what could I have done? What could I have done? What could I have stepped in and done? And I think the most important thing is that we have to stop thinking about it as a choice. And that would be like saying that you chose cancer or you chose any other disease or illness. Nobody's choosing these things. These things are happening. Some of them are amplified by your environment, but they are in you. And because you can't see them the same way, or you can't see the impacts, it's hard for people to understand. But if we can get that and then see about the treatment, and that's what I always say is, you cannot, what you could have done, I can't say because I don't know their whole story. But I do know that if as a society we can treat this more openly, then the moment that we start talking about the symptoms and the things that you might, paralyzed hands, or sharing our own stories, people will immediately say, wait, I can talk to that person. At least I could talk to that person. I know that another person has had this. And then it will spark something, maybe a little seed in their mind. If I had felt that, if I had heard somebody say, when I wake up, I feel like the blinds are shut and I cannot have the will to live, not just I can't get out of bed, I do not want to live, I would say, wow, somebody else did that. And then they not only survived, but thrived. I hope that that can help them see how temporary that moment is.
Absolutely. So here you are, you're in your darkest moment,
Mhm.
the shades have closed. You don't even want to go on.
Mhm.
Um, what happened? What made that change? That one step or that support? Was there
Yeah.
somebody? Did you
I
have
mean,
somebody?
it's part of why I'm here and telling more stories after that first book. The reason more became because I realized that I have the privilege, the financial ability, the family support, and the access to therapy that so many people don't have. And so that's why I keep pushing this, because I was lucky. I'm lucky to be here. I made it out. And there is some, I hope, purpose in me being able to do that and to connect to somebody else, because after the first attempt and then my second suicide attempt, I really had still not gotten the help that I needed. And I was in the third time that was really the pivotal turning point in my mental health journey. Was I was in an abusive relationship. I was in a hotel in New Mexico, um, running away from my abusive boyfriend, hiding under a table. And I called my mom and I said, I don't, I'm feeling that way again. And I told you I would feel that way, but I don't want to live. And she said, I am so afraid for you, whether it's you or him, someone is going to hurt you. and I need you to get help, and I need you to call the police. And I was like, Mom, this seems so dramatic. I don't know that that's necessary. And she begged me. And it was finally the time where I said, okay. I was really scared of him. I think that was in the best way helping me to get to this point. And I called the police, and here I am, privileged to be able to call the police and know that they'll be able to help me, which not everybody has that feeling. And they did. And I sat in the front seat of a trooper's car, and I'm driving away with them as they're taking me to be separated from this person. And I'm asking myself, because I had already gotten my job at ABC, I just hadn't started yet, is this the type of situation or woman that Diane Sawyer is going to want on her program? I don't think so. Like, I have to get it together. Whatever this is, I have lost myself. I am so close to losing everything I've worked so hard for. And that was the glimmer of hope. That was the little sliver of, I can find some way out of this, like a crack in those shades. And that's when I decided to check myself into the psych ward at Columbia. And that's when people are like, whoa, now she's serious. Like that still gets a lot of eyebrows raising around the world, I would say. We haven't gotten the stigma away from psych wards.
No.
But I'll tell you, that is where I got the help I needed. I got the best and the diagnosis that I'd never gotten before, that was the correct diagnosis, the one that got me to the right type of therapy, because there are different types of therapy. And here I am a decade later, cannot believe the peace that I've been able to find because of it.
Wow. Wow. So the inspiration didn't just come from within.
No.
But it also came from your mom.
Yeah, I would say so. And almost that man that was so terrible, like in the strangest way, I am grateful for that, because I think my fear and I knew that I wasn't myself with him. I knew that something was off. And a lot of people in abusive relationships will say that, but they don't know how to get out. And so this gave me and the hospital was a safe place to be from both of us.
So you had several inspirations that really drove that. So let's talk about the book. You wrote the first book, Natural Disaster. I uncover them and I am one.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a beautiful book. But now you've done this follow up, a little closer to home, and how you found the calm after the storm. So you want to unpack that a little?
Sure. Yeah. Natural Disaster was the easiest title to write ever. I cover them. I am one, because that's me. And what I realized in covering these storms, and I've done so many, everything from every hurricane to the tornadoes to wildfires, floods, you name it. And then I've been there. I noticed, because I'm in this unique place where I show up and I get to see how people react after these disasters. And it's actually pretty similar. The way that people grieve a disaster looks the same, no matter what type it is. And I think what I figured out as I watched them happen time and again is, people go through shock. They often hit the sadness or anger, flip-flop one of the other two. Then they go through extreme frustration, isolation, and feeling a little like, even though there are people around them doing the same thing, they feel a little like, why me? And that's very natural. And then by the end, and it often takes just a week, it's one of the fastest grief processes I think out there. They often come to helping each other, helping others, sometimes faster than that. And that's why you see the cliche come up, and people, in a news story, it's like, well, and the community came together. Well, the reason the community came together was because you couldn't not see it. Everybody knew that the tornado took everybody's home. So that common thread of trauma was there. There wasn't a silence, even though it might have hurt, and there wasn't a stigma. It was just nature. People give nature a lot of grace, but we will not give ourselves grace or others grace.
No.
And that right there hit me, as I was going through these, watching people process grief so fast. It was like, wow, they let it go. Mother Nature, sure, you're good to go. They really were able to allow for life to be and to have moved through it. Now, I'm not saying that they're not impacted 20 years later, because everybody is. You're never going to delete the trauma of a tornado wrecking your home or hurting your neighbor or your sibling or whatever it is. That is never going to go away. But to be able to have the community that did it together, there is huge power in that. So if we can apply that to the traumas of our life, and if we start making our tornadoes known, making my disaster known, there is incredible healing in sharing that community of mental health.
Absolutely. And right now, after, running after COVID and the anxiety and depression so high because people were isolated and really feeling alone, how valuable your book is right now
Mm.
for that. So what do you want people to take away from your book? What do you want them to, what actions shall
Well,
they?
that's it. I think, we have all been in the same storm in the pandemic. Within a century, we are the first ones after the Spanish flu to be going through something of this sort. And I think we need to recognize that we can all talk more, talk about how you feel. Nobody's going to not understand what you're saying. Now I saw a meme at the beginning of the pandemic and it was so well done because we're all in the same storm, but we're on different boats because of course people have different access and they have different ability to float and they have different, right? And so it's not the same for everybody, but the anxiety and the fear, and that's pretty similar in everyone's case. And that's something that we can share with each other and we should bring it up. We should talk about it with people who are close to us, but maybe even people who are not. And the more you start sharing in that trauma, the more you process it. So you're not going to delete the trauma of it, but you're going to process through it and be able to exit and not have it cause stress on your body and mind.
One of the things you're bringing up is get out there talking. But one of the
Yeah.
hardest things, for myself included in this, that, you know, afraid of judgment
Mm-hmm.
of that. And you mentioned it a little bit with people, that going to a hospital and actually being, committed in that sense can be their best help.
Mm-hmm.
But just to even voice it and worried about the judgment keeps people back. Do you have any suggestions on how to break out of that?
I think as society, I would love for us to start treating mental health and rehabilitation of our mental health a lot like drugs and alcohol. And I think if you were to say it was the 1940s or 50s and you said somebody went to drug rehab, people would be like, whoa.
Yeah.
If you say someone went to drug rehab today, we go, good for them. So all we have to do is change the idea surrounding what it is to care for yourself and make yourself the best version of yourself. And even if heroin's not involved, but mental illness is, all the better. Good for them. They went to the hospital. Good for them. At the same time, the hospital's not fun. That psych ward was far from Club Med. I mean, it was very scary and it was not easy. And I've heard horror stories from other people that are like, the hospital was not good for me. So I think and there are some general practitioners that know where to go as far as being a funnel. I think we should think about our medical professionals and say, perhaps they know how to help if we can't get ourselves to talk to somebody else within our life to help us find the direct route to the type of therapy we need. Go to somebody who probably knows somebody, and that would be like a general practitioner. I do think that we're missing that big funnel, the one where, and I've been saying it's like the McDonald's of mental health, like the Betty Ford for drugs and alcohol. We need that. We need the branded, it's okay to go there place that people can go, they can get assessed, and then disseminated to the parts or the therapy that they specifically need, or the care, the maintenance and care.
Excellent. Oh, wow, man, if we could have that and people, what a healthier society we'd have, because all of us, bottle it up and are afraid of exposing ourselves. And it's vulnerable.
And there's not a setup for it. You think about why I went to the hospital when I went to the hospital, and I've thought a lot about this. Part of it was because I was between my two jobs and I had a week. I had 2 weeks, but I knew that I had time, that somebody wouldn't know, that somebody wouldn't see, and that I wouldn't have to explain that. And not everybody has that moment. Mine happened to come at the exact right moment in my life. But I hope that we can get, and I don't know how much hope I have for that because we don't even care for people who are having children. But I do hope that we could get to a place where it would be okay to do that. Because again, if we go to the shattered leg, if somebody's got a shattered leg, your boss is not questioning that you need to be in traction at the hospital for a week.
No.
Nobody even blinks an eye. They're like, good, oh my gosh, get better. Give you 6 weeks. You got a whole disability. You got the whole thing. That isn't, even though it's set up in some places that way, people don't understand it. We need to educate both the people who are the employee and the employer. And I think there's a lot of work that could be done like that. because, when I was on maternity leave, I think anybody who first goes on maternity leave learns that it's called disability. And I was like, huh. So you have to take disability out of your time of disability because you're having a child. So I'm kind of over that. Okay, then that should be part of the mental health as well, right? And I guess, but no,
I agree.
we should make something separate. But that would really help too, because then people would feel empowered and okay with going to get help, just like they would if they got in an accident.
Absolutely. Yeah, we only have a minute or two left here, Ginger, but I want to thank you again for being a part of this. Everybody, please take a moment. Her books, and even her children's books are so inspiring. Take a moment, check Ginger Z's book out, A Little Closer to Home, the new one. It will touch you and your heart. I know it'll inspire you to get the help you need, and reach out. Reach
Yes.
out and check Ginger Z's
And right.
website. Yeah, you can reach out and let us know here on our channel, Inspirational Whispers. And thank you again for watching. Thank you, Ginger, for being here. In a world where inspiration and passion is so needed, we find it to help you change the world. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you.